Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good evening. We are tonight on lesson 3 for our third module of the emotional healing course. And this is the first of 2 lessons. We're going to talk about flower essences for emotional healing. So we'll get my little webcam turned on. And let me also turn on the file sharing for the handouts for this so that you can basically download them if you want to follow along with the color handouts. So flower essences are probably they're not as important when I'm actually doing like one-on-one emotional healing work, the actual what I call emotional facilitation, but they're very important in how I approach getting people started in emotional healing. And I want to tell you a little bit about my background with flower essences. I got started in flower essences about a year after I got started in emotional healing. And I got interested in them from a book called 7 Herbs, Plants as Teachers by Matthew Wood. Now, I had used rescue remedy before, but I had never really gotten into the whole Bach flower remedies thing. So I started experimenting with using flower essences for people. Now, what flower essences are, for those who aren't familiar with them, is they're not essential oils. And that's very, very important to understand the difference between essential oils and flower essences. We are going to have 2 lessons on aromatherapy for emotional healing as well. But flower essences are a homeopathic-like remedy. Essential oils are actually a physical substance that's extracted from plants, whereas a flower essence is a vibrational remedy. It doesn't really contain an extract of the plant. It's made usually by soaking flowers in water and sunlight, and then you preserve that with brandy to make a mother tincture. And then the mother tincture is diluted in a kind of a homeopathic manner. It's not diluted in the same precise way that homeopathic remedies are. But I know FES told me that basically their finished flower essences would contain 1 part in, I don't remember, something like 1.9 million parts there was 1 part of the original flower remedy and 1.9 million parts of the finished one. So it's a subtle vibrational thing. And it was developed by Dr. Drew Bach, who was an English medical doctor who started off in studying disease and germs and pathology, became interested in gut microflora, interestingly enough, and started being able to predict by the bacteria that were out of balance in a person's gut what kinds of health problems they would have, developed homeopathic remedies to balance bacteria, then started to notice that there was a correlation between diseases and a person's emotional health status, and also between their ability to recover. And so he became interested in treating the whole person and felt that, the person's mental and emotional state was a huge part of what made them physically ill. And in the course of his life, he developed 38 flower remedies and a blend of flower remedies called Rescue Remedy. He was definitely a vision. Like I said, flower essences are generally made by infusing the flowers in sunlight in a glass container, except for a couple of tree flowers that are boiled to make the extraction. And a few modern flower essences are actually picked in with night blooming flowers on a full moon and basically extracted at night. But most of them are extracted in sunlight. And then again, they're homeopathically diluted to make the remedy for the person. So you make what's called a stock tincture by adding 5 to 6 drops of the mother tincture, which is the original infusion preserved with brandy, to a 1 ounce bottle. You shake it, and then that creates the stock tincture. And then from the stock tincture, you make the dosage bottle for clients. Now, you can purchase stock kits from various companies. FES Services, Flower Essence Services is my favorite. This is a picture of a couple of their kits. I have these in my office, and you buy little teeny stock bottles, and then from that you make dosage bottles for clients. Now these are some of the companies I get flower essences from. Like I said, my favorite is FES Services, and also I created, with the help of Flower Essence Services, 7 flower essence blends that are sold by Nature Sunshine Products. These are dosage bottles, not stock bottles. And I'm going to talk about these blends tonight. I don't receive royalties on them. I'm not going to get any money for promoting them. It's just that they're really amazing products. And I really I'm concerned that they sell very slowly in Nature Sunshine. And I'm very concerned about losing them because I think that they are valuable and can really, really help people. Plus the individual remedies in them, as we talk about tonight, will help you understand flower remedies more. The Bach flower remedies, which are actually sold as English flower remedies by FES, are also available from bachflower.com. The people who are running bachflower.com, I don't think are as careful as FES in making their essences anymore. And so I actually think FES's versions of the Bach flower remedies are better. I've also used the Australian bush flower remedies, although my kit got old and I didn't use it anymore and haven't had money to buy a new one. And there's a couple other companies that I'm familiar, Desert Alchemy. Floralive is very interesting. I've met the guy who built Floralive. He actually makes flower essences from the live flowers. He has a special process for doing that. And that's a very interesting process. There's star flower essences. There's also tree flower essences. There's quite a few out there. But I really like FES. Now, when you make the dosage bottle, what I do is I pre-fill little amber black glass bottles, usually with purified water and 20% brandy. You can also use 60% glycerin and 40% purified water to make stock bottles for people who are like alcoholics or so forth, or children. But it's a good idea to use spring water or purified water, but not distilled water. Distilled water is kind of dead and lifeless. You take and add 2 drops of each of the flower essence that you want to use into the pre-made dosage bottles. You shake them vertically against the palm of your hand like this. In fact, this is the flower essence someone gave me. There's also, I've got a couple up here. This is another one. Another blend that I have from a different company. These are dosage bottles. And it does help if I often will, say a little prayer, send loving thoughts to the person, and then I label it and give it to the client. If you make it in pure water, it should be refrigerated and used up in a week. I will use up to, I use typically, I don't know why it comes up for me, but 4 comes up all the time for me as the number of flower essences I typically give a client at one time. You can use anywhere from 2. I've made some simple blends for people with 2 flower essences. And you can use up to 7, which is what I used in the ones I created for Nature Sunshine. But I try to focus whatever I'm working on with a person to a singular issue. In other words, I don't try to work on everything that they're struggling with. I try to pick a specific issue. Like, for example, if they're experiencing fear, I work on the fear. If they're also experiencing anger, I'll work on that maybe later. There are a number of ways to select flower remedies. One is you can just use the look up the information. I should have had my FES book here, which is a really good reference for this. And you just talk to the person, you find out what it is, you look up flower essences in the book. I'm in the process of updating my database for the member area. And we are putting in a whole bunch of flower remedies and essential oils into the database and linking them to various mental and emotional situations. So I look forward to when that's available, which means you'd be able to look up essences. Even when I am intuitively picking essences, like with muscle testing or whatever, I still look up in the book and and read what it's about and kind of show the client about what it's about. I have a questionnaire that's available at treelight.com. And we have sold those questionnaires before. I think we might sell them again. We have to update them, take the NSP specific stuff off of them, but that come up with the 7 flower essence blends that Nature Sunshine has. But a lot of times you can just pick them just as you get experience by just feeling kind of a match between the person and the remedy. So the big question is, how does this work? The Matthew Wood kind of helped me understand this, that a plant basically faces challenges. Plants have different environments in which they grow. They might grow in a very dry place. They might grow in a very damp place. They might grow in very rocky soil. They might have very harsh weather conditions. And they have to have the energy within them, the genetic frequencies, if you will, that gather from their environment the things that they need to produce the chemical compounds and so forth that allow them to survive these challenges. So what you do in flower essence therapy, and to a certain extent in aromatherapy as well, is you look at the characteristics of this plant. You look at the how it grows, its life cycle, the challenges it faces and everything. And from that, you create a picture of sort of the personality of the plant. And you use that as a guide to when a person needs that kind of a personality trait, you are giving them that vibration of that flower essence to help them intuitively, on a very instinctual level, to feel or sense or move into that same kind of vibration to help them cope with the challenges of their life. Now, all that sounds really esoteric, but it's not placebo effect. And I know this because when I got into flower essences and we were playing with them, my staff at the time became very interested in this, and they decided to do some experiments. And they picked some guinea pigs, some people who were, that they wanted, that they felt could use some emotional healing work. And they would pick one single flower essence that they felt was beneficial for this person. And they would make it up in an unmarked bottle, and they would give it to them. And they would not tell them what it was for, what it was, or what it was supposed to do. Nothing. They just say, take this and report back on how you feel after you take it. And a couple of very interesting examples of what happened was, one, they decided to use a flower essence of dandelion, which is for people who are uptight and striving too hard and pushing themselves too hard and very tense in their bodies because they're over striving and over performing. And they picked this for the UPS driver. And they were afraid that if they gave him the bottle, he wouldn't take it. So what they did is he would come in the morning to do the drop off and come in the afternoon to the pickup. And they would give him the drops when he came, both in the morning and the afternoon. And 3 days later, he said, "Can I take that bottle with me?" And they said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Because every time I leave here, I feel more relaxed. I don't feel so uptight. I don't feel so tense." Nobody told him that that's what it was for. Nobody said anything about it. The other one was interesting. My wife at the time was a consummate procrastinator, and she never finished projects. She would start a project like knitting something or making some kind of craft project or whatever. And she would get to where she was maybe 70, 80% done, and she would abandon it, go to something else. She just didn't finish things. She didn't follow through. Well, they gave her Tansy, which is for procrastinators and people who don't follow through. And I was blown away because in the next 2 weeks, she finished 3 craft projects that she'd started 2 years ago. And again, I have no explanation for how that happened, but we saw that happen where people, not knowing what the flower essence was for, we saw it would do the very thing that the book said it would do. And so that really made me a believer that there is something really going on. And I remember one time when I was giving a class in Australia, these ladies told me that they were in a class and there was someone on the front row who was constantly interrupting, asking questions without waiting to be called on. The questions were off topic, diverting the teacher. The teacher was getting really frustrated. And so these two girls had a bunch of the Australian bush flower remedies, and they kind of looked at this girl and kind of figured out what was going on with her personality. And while she was out to the bathroom on a break, they put a flower essence in her drinking water. Okay? Understand? They put a flower essence in her drinking water. And they said, when she came back and she took some sips of her water, she says it was really interesting. She see that she would go like she was about to interrupt, and then she would think better of herself and wait. I've also had people give flower essences to people on the sly, and they've seen changes in people. So I use flower essences to soften people into the emotional healing work. People come into me and they're interested in herbs and they're interested in nutrition and that sort of thing. And I will do, as part of the consultation, I will make a flower essence for them. And I'm able to intuitively sense what flower essences people need in a process I might demonstrate in the next class. But I had one person tell me that this was better than a psychic reading because I absolutely nailed what was going on inside of them. But not only did I nail it, I actually gave them something to do about it, which was really interesting. So in the previous module, I discussed my sevenfold emotional model. Now, this is not the 12 energy center model. This is a simpler model that I use to teach people about basic emotions. And the three primary emotional imbalances, anger, grief, and fear, and the three secondary ones. And this is all related to the energetics of expansion, contraction, and equilibrium. And this model, with the one in the center representing becoming the center, was what I used to create these flower essence blends. Now, what's interesting is when I created this model of emotional healing, it's basically a 3-axis model. When I say 3 axes, I mean it's like there's 3 directions that you can go out of balance. And so like the one axis is anger and discouragement. The other one is grief and hardness. And the other one is anxiety and compulsion. And I was thinking about this in the shower one morning, and all of a sudden I realized this completely overlapped the physical healing model of the directions of inaction that Matthew Wood introduced me to, and that I've worked on with Matthew, which is irritation and depression, dampness and dryness, and constriction and relaxation. And I knew that I had something. So what I did is when I created these flower essence blends is I created 7 of them. The white one is to help center a person, bring the person to center. The red one is for the emotional irritation, which is anger, irritability, being overly aggressive, that sort of thing. The green is for emotional depression, which is actually the opposite problem of not asserting oneself, not standing up for oneself, not fighting back and helping someone stand up for themselves. Then the blue and the orange have to do with how we handle grief and pain. The blue is for the, take care of me, pity poor me little victim kind of mentality kind of thing. And the orange is for the person who has the kind of like, grow up, you cry baby, blah, 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 tough it out, who is hard to get close to emotionally because they lack emotional sensitivity. Then the yellow and the purple has to do with how we handle fear. The yellow is basically people who let their fear cause them to place overconfidence in other people, thinking that other people, whether it's the government or their church or authority figures like medical doctors are going to fix their problems and so forth, and give up their own sense of self-judgment, okay, and confidence in their own ability to make decisions and solve their own problems, versus the more reckless person who basically just says, heck with that, don't care about anything, throw caution to the winds, which often results in addictive, compulsive, self-defeating behaviors. So what I did, I came up with the concept for this, and then I roughed it out. And what I did is I took the model as a whole, and I tried for each of the flower remedies to pick one flower remedy that fit in each of those areas pertaining to that particular topic. And what I did with the distress remedy, and I'm going to explain the distress remedy the most, is I basically took the Bach rescue remedy and I added 2 flower essences to it to create a 7 remedy blend rather than a 5 remedy blend. And what you have here is, see, the red is the anger area. So impatience, which was in the original rescue remedy, is for people who are impatient and intolerant and overly judgmental of others. The blue, which is for grief, is Star of Bethlehem, which comforts people who are in a crisis, in a moment of loss or something like that. And rock rose, which eases panic, terror, and deep fear. So those 3 were all in the original rescue remedy. And then you had cherry plum, which is loss of control, not feeling in control of your life, feeling your life is like out of control. Clematis for being disconnected. And then I added red clover for being overly absorbed into group thought, and Arnica as a basic remedy for shock and trauma, and created this flower essence blend. Arnica is a really, really useful flower essence. I mean, it's used as a homeopathic remedy for healing physical wounds, physical trauma. You get bumps, bruises, whatever, and swelling accompanying that, and you use Arnica to speed healing. Well, it has the same effect emotionally as a flower essence. When people have been traumatized, it helps bring them back to center. It helps. It's a really good basic flower remedy if someone's having a hard time getting in trouble with what's bothering them, and especially if it's causing them psychosomatic illness. So it can be used in the short term, when someone just has immediately suffered an emotional shock, or it can be used in the long term to help people who have been traumatized many years ago to get in touch with the trauma and help heal it. And each of these ones has a core essence, and the core Arnica is the core essence of this blend. And I also added the other one I mentioned, which is red clover, which is an interesting one because it deals with getting caught up in the mob mentality. And emotions are contagious. And as an example of this, years ago when I was first getting started in this, when I was down in Australia, I was in the airport and there was news on TV of like a stock market collapse, and you could see all these businessmen in there, and they were all getting anxious, and I started to feel anxious too. And then I said, wait a minute, I don't care about the stock market. I don't own any stocks. What am I getting all upset for? When everybody around you is getting caught up in fear or anxiety or hysteria, and media is really good at doing this. The mainstream media is really good at hyping up your fears, hyping up your anxieties, hyping up your anger, playing on your emotions, sucking you into the drama, and you're getting you to feel all this stuff. And then you think, oh, this must be real because I'm feeling all these emotions. Well, not necessarily. Okay, you have emotions watching a movie or a play or listening to a piece of music, and it isn't because it's what's really happening. So this helps you disconnect from the dysfunctional group mentality. Now, one time when I was teaching this, a lady told me that it was very interesting. She said there was an earthquake in her area and everybody else was all traumatized and everything. She felt surprisingly calm. And she says, I now know why, is because I've been drinking red clover tea for a month. So the herb has some of these things in it. Now, I want to tell you a little about rescue and distress remedy. I have used this many times during crisis situations to help pull people back to center, calm them down. They're obviously really, really good things to have on hand as kind of first aid remedies to give someone who's emotionally traumatized. So when someone suffered a shock due to like an accident or an injury or an illness, or they've suffered an emotional shock due to death or divorce or anything like that, a good basic remedy to use is either rescue remedy or the distress remedy blend that I created, which I call Rescue Plus 2. And they can really be helpful. Now, Star of Bethlehem is also for shock or trauma, but it's for connecting. Arnica is to bring you back into yourself, okay? Star of Bethlehem is to help you find comfort from the spiritual realm, to bring a spiritual awareness into the current situation. The Lily family, I have found in my work in emotional healing, is very, very much about the softer, more receptive, feminine side of our personality. And so all of the different lily flower essences seem to have a lot to do with mothering, nurturing, and in this case, it's nurturing your spiritual soul in a time of crisis to help you find comfort. So I'm going to go a lot more quickly through these other blends, but I just want to kind of, again, show you a pattern. Number one, about how flower essences can be combined, but also some very basic flower essences for helping people with some of these emotional states. So Keep Cool is for people who do what I call vent their anger, which is that they use their anger to try to control other people. And when a person is using their anger to try to control other people, it's because they're out of control within themselves. The more a person is in control of themselves, the less they feel the need to control others. The less a person is in control of themselves, the more they feel the need to control others. And so a person who is what I call venting anger is really basically out of control of their own life. And so they're looking to dominate other people. And the three core essences in here are Impatience, Vine, and Snapdragon. Impatience, again, was in the rescue remedy. It was actually the first Bach flower remedy that Bach created, and it helps people who are impatient and intolerant and get frustrated easily with other people. Vine is for people who like to be domineering and controlling of others, and Snapdragon is for people who are verbally aggressive. And I think the name says it really well. Snap, like okay. When I did these essences, what I did is I gave the initial thing to Patricia Kaminsky and Richard Katz, and they went and prayed and meditated on the model, and then we all got together on the telephone and discussed it until we all came up with that all of that was perfect. It fit very well. So the three primary essences, which deal with three primary emotions, are always designed to deal with kind of the outer symptomatic part of this, and the other three are dealing with the more deep-seated inner problems that the person is having that's causing that. So, for example, Holly is people who are jealous and angry because they don't feel loved themselves. Tiger Lily, because a person is overly aggressive because they want love and cooperation. Remember, Lily is for the softer feminine side. And so the idea of Tiger Lily is that it's helping the tiger to get in touch with their softer side. And Willow is for people who feel victimized. And they're bitter and angry about being victimized, see? So, and the center is Calendula. And Calendula is basically designed, if you look at it, Calendula as a physical remedy, Calendula is for cuts. Well, as an emotional remedy, it's for people who are cutting. We all know what it means for somebody to cut us verbally, to basically try to wound us with their words. So calendula helps a person become aware of how their words wound others, and helps them learn to be more listening and receptive in communication and less argumentative and confrontational. Snapdragon, again, is for people who are verbally aggressive. They carry tension in their jaw. They may have problems grinding their teeth. And again, both of these essences help a person listen more and talk less. Because if the angry person can stop being so trying to impose my will on yours and be more open to hearing your side of the story and listening and hearing before I speak, right? That's the real solution. And that's the primary thing this flower essence is designed to do. By the way, Impatience is the first flower remedy that Bach created. And you know the saying, physician healed thyself? It perfectly fit Bach's own personality. He was very busy. He was very forward-thinking, very ahead of his time, and he got very impatient with people who couldn't keep up with him. And he had to learn to be more patient and tolerant with others and go with the flow of things rather than always struggling, fighting against it. And so I think that's a very interesting thing about doing emotional healing work, because I tell people this all the time. You want to do emotional healing work with other people, the first person to work on is yourself. Start working on your issues, and then you're going to be much better able to help others. Now, Fine Strength is the opposite flower remedy from the Keep Cool. It's basically people who suppress their anger, and they wind up being pushovers, doormats, people pleasers. Those are really good terms to describe the people who are stuck in what I call the green quadrant. And when you are a people pleaser and a pushover or a doormat, it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to get depressed. You can get jealous of the things other people enjoy. And you also tend to be overly sympathetic to the victims and have a hard time standing up for yourself. So the three kind of outer remedies here, scarlet monkey flower. Now, this is interesting. Remember, this is in the anger quadrant. This is for people who cannot acknowledge their own anger and face it or deal with it, okay? The century is for people who are weak-willed and basically are very serving to other people, but they're serving from weakness and fear rather than from strength. And pine, which it deals with, is in the fear area of this, deals with having accepted what we call toxic shame. In other words, they feel bad and ashamed and guilty about themselves and so forth, and need to learn to forgive and accept themselves. And then, of course, the other essences, you can look at these, and if you read more detailed descriptions of this, you understand. But the core one in here is an essence I use a lot, I'll probably mention, which is Mariposa Lee, which helps with feeling nurtured, because the core issue with these people typically is they don't feel worthy of standing up for themselves. They don't feel they're worthy of being loved and treated well and everything. If they felt like they were worthy of being loved and treated well, they would stand up for themselves. That was a very big lesson I learned for myself, because I used to be a people pleaser. Pine, as I mentioned, is for people who suffer from feeling guilty, like you were sexually abused, so you feel guilty, right? Well, that's called toxic shame. There's a healthy shame, which is when I do something to hurt somebody else, I should be ashamed of myself. But when someone else does something to hurt me, and I'm ashamed of myself because of it, I'm misapplying shame because the other person is trying to make like it's my fault. It's not. And what Pine does is help you let go of that. And then Century is for people who have a hard time saying no. What people in this area have a hard time with is being able to tell other people no. They feel guilty when they say no. They feel like I've always got to be nice. I've always got to be loving. I've always got to serve other people, blah, blah, blah. But you don't. You need to serve other people when you feel good about serving other people, not because you feel guilty about not serving other people, if that makes sense. By the way, this particular blend, I do a little exercise which I'm going to talk about later in this module, where I have a person stand up and I gently push on their shoulder, and people who have poor personal boundaries and are people pleasers just kind of fall backwards. They just with the gentlest pressure, they fall over. And giving them this flower essence, they immediately become more solid. They stop being pushovers. And I've had people report amazing changes in themselves after taking this. One lady came back and told me I'm a whole new different person 2 weeks after starting on this flower essence. She says, I'm bolder, I'm braver, I'm going out doing things I want. I actually asked a guy out on a date. It really has amazing benefits for people. Now, release it is the formula for grief, for what I call vented grief. It's a person who's whining and pitying and stuck in their past losses and hurts and pain, what I call the victim mentality. Over and over and over again, reliving what the losses and injustices they've suffered in the past. In fact, people are not only doing this with themselves, they're doing this generationally. They sit there, and because their great grandfather suffered some loss or injustice, they're still moaning that they're a victim and so forth. It's very, very unhealthy to be stuck in that. So the core essence in here is self-heal, which is actually an essence that I've used with the person who comes into a consultation and, fix me, fix me, fix me. And then you give them suggestions, change your diet, take these supplements, blah, blah, blah. They come back, they haven't done anything that you suggested. Fix me, fix me, fix me. Well, why aren't you changing your diet? Why aren't you taking these herbs? Why aren't you doing, please fix me. I'm a mess. Okay. In other words, they can't accept their own responsibility to participate in their own healing. That's the core issue. They've got to take self-responsibility. The victim mentality is saying, I'm the helpless victim of other people. I have no power. And self-heal says, yes, I do have power. I can change. I can heal my body. I can heal my life. I can do something about that. That's the core essence of this. What's interesting here in the anger formula, have you ever known a person who's always demanding your love, possessive, needy, demanding your love? It's like an aggressive, plea for love. Love lies bleeding, which is an amazing essence for like profound soul anguish of the heart. The person who feels like nobody has ever suffered as much as I'm suffering. And bleeding heart, which is one of the most valuable flower essences I've used for people who are grieving, for people who are going through a divorce, people who have just lost loved ones or things due to death or something. And it teaches a very core lesson. I don't control what I love. I have to, love can only exist in freedom. I can't smother what I'm loving. Those three essences form a really basic triangle of essences that are really useful for the person who's overly sad, needy, and dependent. Again, this is in the courage, Borage, which helps a person have the courage in the face of adversity and to take heart. So all of these, again, are designed around the basic model. As I've said, self-heal really is for people who are overly dependent on other people and need help take care of themselves. Borage, which is such a beautiful flower, it is always been associated with helping a person get over heavy-heartedness, feeling weighed down, lacking confidence. I've seen Borage. I gave Borage flower essence once to somebody. They had been on a mission for their church into some third world country, either in South America or Africa. They had contacted parasites. They had come back to the States. They had struggled with their health for a long time, and they were so discouraged they wanted to die. They wanted to just end their life. And I gave them Borage flower essence, and in 2 or 3 days, they were like, I'm going to beat this. Everything's fine. I'm going to be okay. They had a whole new outlook on life. It's an amazing remedy for taking heart, for helping a person have the inner heart courage to go on with life even when things are difficult and challenging. Open heart is the opposite. This is the person who basically has stuffed their grief and pain inside, decided that, I'm not going to let anybody get close to me. I'm going to be strong. I'm going to be independent. I don't need you. The opposite of the other person who, I need you. I need you. I need you. I need you. I don't need you. Grow up, you cry bear baby, blah, blah, blah. And these people can be very cold and uncaring and insensitive and difficult to get close to. They're the kind of person who they have this push me pull. They'll draw you into a relationship and then push you away. As soon as you start to get close to them, they push you away because they're afraid of being intimate. They want that intimacy and love, but they're afraid of it. And so there's this, and if you're in a relationship with one of these people, it can be very, very difficult because they're just very difficult to get close to. The core essence here is California Wild Rose, which is, I think, one of the most phenomenal essences there is, both as an essential oil and as a flower remedy for opening the heart. When the heart has been wounded and is closed down and shut down and hard, rose opens the heart. It softens the heart. It promotes a greater feeling of compassion, warmth, and openness. And by the way, this is actually the state of emotional being that creates heart attacks. Being hard of heart creates heart attacks. Now, 3 core essences here. Star tulip, they're hardened and cut off, can't quiet themselves, can't find peace, can't meditate. Yerba Santa, constricted in the chest. They can't breathe freely. Their grief is smothered and constricted. And in this case, this thing is often linked to a lack of a healthy father figure and not feeling safe and comfortable with life. And baby blue eyes is basically for people who had a lack of a healthy father figure. And it helps them learn to trust, to have a childlike trust and innocence, to be able to feel supported, to get over their fear of life, if you will. So all the roses and the Bach Wild Rose also is opening to the heart. It's listed a little bit differently than the California Wild Rose, but I think both of them do very well in terms of opening the heart. This also helps people who feel resigned or apathetic, as well as people who feel sad and so forth. One of the essences in here, which is a foundational essence in here, and one I've used a lot in emotional healing when I've actually been doing emotional healing sessions and we get stuck. The person has this pain and difficulty from childhood, but they can't get in touch with it. They're very disconnected with it. And I've given them golden eardrops during the session. It's actually helped them remember what happened to them. It actually helps draw up and reconnect with memories that have been repressed and help a person basically bring that forth and heal it and so forth. It's related to bleeding heart. Again, it has this peeled back thing, like you peeled back the inner self, if you will. Be courageous. So we got two more to cover. Be courageous is for the vented fear, for people who are constantly worried, constantly looking for authority figures, constantly dependent on the opinions and advice of others. They're afraid to make their own decisions because they might be wrong and they might do the wrong thing, and so on and so forth. And the core essence here is mountain pride. Mountain pride is really, really good at helping people get the ability to meet the challenges of life, to stand up for themselves. It's very, forthright, strong flower essence for people who need to be able to take charge of their life and meet life's challenges head on with courage. There are 3 basic core kinds of fear that are addressed in the 3 basic essences here. Mimulus is a basic remedy for fears that you have. So a specific phobia, like a fear of mice or a fear of whatever. And it helps the person tackle the fear. It helps them just face it head on and aggressively go after it. Aspen, on the other hand, is for vague, unknown fears. That is, a person feels fear, but they don't know what they're afraid of. They're just kind of afraid of life in general. And it helps to make them feel more confident in actually making decisions. And then scleranthus is for someone who's afraid to make decisions. They're like, should I do this? Should I do that? I don't know. Is this the right thing to do? Is that the right thing to do? Blah, blah, blah. They waver between choices. So, again, mountain pride. And I love this picture because look at where this flower is growing. The penstemons, and there's quite a few species of penstemons out here in the West. I don't know how many penstemons are in the East, but they're a very common kind of wildflower in the West, grow all over different colors. All of them have this uprightness. They grow very erect. They have kind of a tubular flower that usually is straight out or slightly pointed upward. And it's sort of all conveys this thing, I'm here, look at me, I'm strong, etc. And it often grow in rocky soils or difficult places. So mountain pride, this particular penstemon, is people who, they withdraw from challenges. They when there's a challenging thing in their life, they want to pull away from it instead of standing up like a warrior and fighting it. As I mentioned, aspen, out here in the West, quaking aspen. This is an aspen actually that from the English flower remedies, but I think it relates a lot to the aspens we have out here in the West. Quaking aspen has a leaf with a flat petiole, and the slightest little breeze makes the leaves of quaking aspen shake like that. And so I think of aspen as the remedy for people who feel shaky. They feel this shakiness, this low-level anxiety in their life, the kind of apprehension, what's going to happen next, blah, 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 blah. And it helps people, overcome that and have more trust and confidence in life. And as I mentioned, mimulus is a primary remedy from the Bach flower remedies for fear, and also for overcoming shyness. And the monkey flowers, this is a monkey flower, Mimulus genus, all, in my opinion, seem to have this common theme of helping us face ourselves, helping us take a look at things inside of ourselves that we don't want to look at. Scarlet monkey flower helps people look at their anger and their lust. Mimulus helps people look at their fear. There's other ones that help people look at, purple monkey flower helps people look at ritualistic abuse and things that they have had in their life. There's one that helps people who are afraid of their sexuality and so forth. So they're all helping you face what's inside of you. The last one here in this group is Be Responsible, which is a blend for dealing with people who are being reckless and irresponsible. It helps people with addictions. It helps people's compulsions. It helps people with obsession and other related anxiety disorders. And the whole goal of this is for people to wake up and be more conscious about the decisions they're making. The person who needs to be responsible doesn't acknowledge their fears. And so rather than exercising due caution and being careful about what they're doing, they get careless and do stupid, dumb things, all right? And the core essence here is black cohosh, which is one of the essences I learned about from Matthew Wood's book, 7 Herbs, Plants as Teachers, which helps people who feel trapped in any kind of negative situation, an abusive relationship or abusive lifestyle, to set themselves free. And milkweed is for dole, one's consciousness through drugs and so forth. California poppy is for seeking the light outside of oneself, trying to find happiness through fame or fortune or material things. And Blackeyed Susan helps a person acknowledge their emotional shadow. Black cohosh has a very interesting signature. It comes from a very gnarled black root up through a tangled green foliage to produce these beautiful spikes of white blossoms. And it in other words, it's a remedy that's very specific for people who feel trapped, who feel like they're lost in darkness, like they're wrestling with forces they can't overcome, to rise above those forces and look up and open up to the light, to consciously face difficult situations and transform them. Now, Matthew Wood says it's specifically indicated for women who keep getting entangled in relationships with abusive and controlling men. But it's good for anybody who feels like they're wrestling with darkness and feel trapped in their life. One time I was feeling that way, and I felt like I was trapped. I'd gotten into my situation I couldn't get out of. I was miserable and unhappy, and I decided to take this. And I took it for 3 days. At the end of 3 days, it was like the light bulb turned on. I realized I wasn't stuck. I could make the changes I needed to get out of this situation. It lifted me right out of the darkness I was in and helped me see my way clear to make changes in my life. And this one here is another essence that I found really helpful for just basic emotional healing. If you look at this flower, you see the dark center surrounded by the beautiful yellow rays. And what Blackeyed Susan does is it helps a person look into the part of themselves they don't want to look at, the part of themselves they're running away from, what we call what Jung called the shadow. It's the part of us that we don't want to acknowledge, the part of us that's not so nice, that's done bad things and so forth, where there's painful memories, and it helps us connect with that part of ourselves and integrate it into our personality as a whole and use it constructively as an important life lesson. Really, really valuable basic flower essence in helping people with emotional healing work. This one is one I want to mention too, because I call this the Cheshire Cat remedy. I was once with a very intuitive person who had a kind of was kind of psychic, and we were at Disneyland together. And the Cheshire Cat, which is the cat in Alice in Wonderland, who has this like grin from ear to ear, who actually is very sarcastic and not very happy at all. But she saw this on the side of one of the things at Disneyland, and she says, I get the word agrimony. What does that mean? And I was like, oh, really? She didn't know about agrimony. Agrimony is the flower essence for people who hide behind a mask of cheerfulness. Really, they're stressed, they're unhappy, they're miserable, but they can't show it. They can't be honest about it. They deny their pain and smile even when they're not happy. And agrimony is to help them get in touch with the truth inside of themselves and deal with it and be emotionally honest with themselves. A very, very valuable flower essence. I see this personality. And here's another one in this mullein, which is a very upright plant, and the flowers are used for the ear. And what this is for helping people be upright and true to their own conscience, to be integrous inside of themselves. So you can see the essences in here all combined to help a person, face what's inside of them. Stop running away from it. Because when people are engaged in drugs and addictive behaviors and reckless things, they're running away from themselves. They're trying to escape themselves. And all of these essences are to go inward and confront oneself. So this is a very basic essence for people who are not confronting what's inside of them and what they need to confront. Now, I'll just, that's the end of the slide presentation. So let me pull up just the camera. And let me ask a few questions, which I've got some really good questions here. One is, can someone on an antidepressant use flower essences? Yes. Flower essences are not chemically altering the biochemistry of the body. They're actually working on more of a spiritual soul level, helping a person face why they're depressed, So it's not going to interfere with any medication. No flower essence is going to interfere with anybody's medication or herbs or supplements they're taking. It's working on an entirely different level to help them, look at what they need to work on inside of themselves. I use flower essences to soften people up to get them ready to do emotional healing. Okay. All of them are safe for pregnant women. They're all safe for nursing women. They're all safe for animals. They're all safe for little children. There's no toxicity to these things. The worst that can happen if you give a person a flower essence they don't need is nothing. They don't have adverse effects or adverse reactions. And if you get the right ones, you'll see people make profound changes in a very short period of time. Someone mentioned that Mountain Pride was very helpful to them in changing the direction of their life. And so I'm glad that was able to work for you. Like I said, I've been using flower remedies now for 30 years, about 30 years, and I love them. And like they're when I don't do a lot of one-on-one consults anymore, but when I do one-on-one consults, I almost always give the person a flower essence. So I give them their herbs, their nutritional supplements, the advice, and then I give them a flower essence, because I believe that there's a mental and emotional component to all illness. And so, if you want to kind of get started, you could try getting just these 7 blends, that I created for Nature Sunshine, and just dabble with them. You don't even necessarily have to sell them to people. You could actually sit there and just give a person a few drops of the right essence while you're talking to them, and it will actually help to open up, make breakthroughs, and get them to actually face things inside of themselves. So they're really, like I said, very, very amazing remedies. Now, in the next session next week, oh shoot, and I forgot to do the file sharing, didn't I? Oh no, I did. I did the file sharing. Okay, that's good. How do you purchase them? If you just want like a flower remedy for yourself, I can mix up anything at my office. If you need help, getting in touch with, if you don't know how to know someone who's in Nature Sunshine, contact our office. We can help you get hooked up with that to get the Nature Sunshine flower remedies. If you look up FES services online, you'll find the FES flower essences. And I did have the one slide that actually showed you several of the places to purchase flower essences. I also want to mention, I'm working on a chart. I'm nearly done with it. My son is editing it, getting ready to print them. We are doing 2 charts, one on aromatherapy, and the other one on flower essences, and also all the question affirmations we use for the different energy centers. And so hopefully within a couple of weeks, we will have those charts available for purchase. So you can see all of the energy centers and what flower essences work on them, and what essential oils work on them, and what question affirmations you use on them. And this class will teach you how to use that stuff. So be on the lookout for that. My 7 essences are available from Nature Sunshine Products. If you'll email me at webinars@treelight.com, I can send you a URL on where you can buy them. Someone says the flower essences can be transformational. I've seen people have almost instant shifts. I have too. I have seen 1 dose of a flower essence make a profound change in a person. If you find a flower essence that is perfect, that really is the match for that person's personality, you could sometimes see changes the first time they take the flower essence. The typical dose is like 4 to 10 drops under the tongue, 1 to 2 or 3 times a day. If you want to get a blend from my office, let's see, do I have the, again, email me at webinars@treelight.com, and what we can do is we can set up a way to get what you want, because I can mix up, flower essence blends of any of the flower essences we talked about, or we can get a list of what you're struggling with, and I can help you come up with a blend that's just for you, and we can send that to you. But just email me at webinars@treelight.com if you're interested in this. I also have a link, and I don't think I have it to put up, but I will put it up on the YouTube video to the scheduling. If you want to do a 15-minute mini consult with me on emotional healing, we can do that just for a flower essence blend, and the flower essence blend would be included with the consultation fee. The flower essences can eventually start to lose potency and go bad, but I've used them for as long as 8 or 9 or 10 years, and they're okay. But after that, I kind of like to replace them and get new ones, partly because, especially, it depends on how you store them. I try to store mine upright like this because the alcohol gets with the rubber stopper and makes the essence start to absorb the materials here. So don't store them like this, store them upright. Next time I'll show you my flower essences. I'll bring the flower essence in here. I'll show you the kits I have. And I will also contact, before the next thing, I'll contact FES. They have in the past given me a special for people I'm teaching classes on to get a discount on their flower essence kits. So I'm going to ask them if they'll do that again. And if they will, I'll give you a code so that you can buy some of the kits from FES if you really want to get some flower essence kits, or just buy some individual stock bottles to get started with making them. I'll also get my dosage bottles, and I'll hold them up and I'll show you a few things. Next week, what we'll do is we're going to go through the 12 emotional energy centers that I explained in the first lesson. And I'm going to talk about some of the key flower essences that I have used for those 12 emotional energy centers. And like I said, I'll also go show you a little bit about how I actually use the flower essence. I'll have some of the flower essences here. And they're really not very expensive. A 15-minute mini consult, which would include the flower essence being made and shipped to you, would be $50. So that includes making up the flower remedy for you and shipping it to you. Not just the time that you'd spend talking to me to figure out what's in it, but also the actual flower remedy itself. I charge for the flower remedy itself $15 plus shipping. So the consult's actually fairly inexpensive if you want to just do the consult. And I will get get out an email. I'll send an email out to everybody, as well as put it on the YouTube video of how to get this. Okay, Cash asked a very interesting question about drop dose herbs. Most of the plants that we talk about with flower essence that are also herbs, okay, like red clover. If you take the tincture of, say, red clover, and you give a person 1 drop of the tincture, it acts very much like the flower essence. So I'm not sure, if one is better than the other, but it definitely is something that you can do. Is if you just use a very tiny amount of the herb, but instead of a bigger dose, you're just using like 1 drop at a time. I don't blame people for thinking that flower essences are airy-fairy. I understood that homeopathy worked, which is why I was open to flower essences. But all of the experiences I've had with flower essences, I have seen remarkable shifts in people. In fact, one of the times when the flower essence didn't work is there was a lady who had mother issues, and she was pregnant. And I wanted her to work on her mother issues so that she wouldn't carry those mother issues over to her child. And I mixed up a flower essence to help her with that. And she came back to me, and she'd taken 1 dose, and she said, "I do not like the way this makes me feel, and I will not take it." And what happened there, and it is the one thing I've seen with flower essences that occasionally happens, is if a person is not ready to face and does not want to face the emotional issues that the flower essence is addressing, they will balk at taking it because it will start to bring up stuff that they don't want to deal with, and they'll back off. The same thing happens in emotional healing. If you touch on something that a person's not ready to deal with, they will balk at it, and you just have to back off and give them time and space until they're ready to work on it. You can't force someone to work on their issues. So like I said, this is lesson 1 of 2 lessons on flower essences. So we'll continue next week with flower essences. And then after that, we will talk about aromatherapy and using essential oils, both of which can be used as remedies. And I'll try to explain a little bit of the difference between the way I use essential oils and the way I use flower essences in doing my emotional healing work. Thanks everybody for being part of the class. Thank you for your support. Thanks to any of you who are donating or helping or have joined our member program to help and support us. For those of you who are interested in our member program and aren't members, tomorrow night we have a webinar on methylation. And if you just joined for 1 month, which is $19.95 for just the 1 month, no further obligation, you can get tomorrow night's methylation webinar and also get access to our member database. And like I said, one of the things we're working on, hopefully in a couple of months we'll be done with, is our online member database will have a whole bunch of flower essences and essential oils and links to how those are used to help people with emotional issues, which will be a great reference for people who are doing this kind of work as well. So thanks everybody, and again, and good night.